My mother called me a late bloomer the first time I brought Callum to Sunday dinner. She said it the way she says most things, with a smile, facing my father, as if I wasn't standing right there holding a dish of roasted potatoes I'd spent 40 minutes on. My father laughed. My brother didn't say anything, which was somehow worse. That was 18 months before the night everything changed. Before my sister's engagement party at the Fairmont in downtown Ottawa, before the moment Callum stood up from his chair and my sister's future father-in-law went completely pale and said, in front of 63 people, "You're the one who built groundwork? But I'm getting ahead of myself. You always have to start earlier than you think. I'm the second of 3 kids. My sister is 4 years older than me, my brother 2 years younger. Growing up, our house ran on a very specific kind of fuel, credentials. Report cards went on the fridge with a ranking system my father never said out loud, but everyone understood. Scholarships were announced at dinner. Acceptance letters were framed, not literally, but close enough. My father is a cardiologist. My mother was a family physician before she semi-retired to manage the family's investment properties. My sister followed them into medicine. She's an orthopedic surgeon now, finishing her fellowship in Toronto. My brother is in his 2nd year of law school at UBC. He wants to do corporate law. My parents talk about him the way people talk about a very good wine they discovered early. I'm a high school art teacher. I teach at a public school in Canada, just west of Ottawa. I've been there for 6 years. I love my students. I genuinely do, but I learned a long time ago not to say that out loud at family dinners, because my father would tilt his head the way he does and say something like, "That's lovely, sweetheart. Very noble." And then the conversation would move on. I met Callum at a farmer's market in the Glebe on a Saturday morning in September 3 years ago. I was buying honey. He was running the stall next to the honey vendor, a produce stand with this enormous hand-lettered chalkboard sign, Lichen Creek Farm, Almonte, ON. He had mud on his boots, even though it hadn't rained. His hands were already rough in the way that comes from actual work, not a gym. He handed me a sample of a heritage tomato I'd never heard of and said, "You're going to want to rethink everything you've ever believed about tomatoes." He wasn't wrong. I stood at that stall for 40 minutes. We talked about food systems, about soil health, about a podcast he'd been listening to on regenerative agriculture in northern climates. I'd come to buy honey, and I left with 3 kinds of squash, a bag of dried beans, and his number written on the back of a paper bag. My mother's first question, when I eventually mentioned him, was, what did his parents do? His parents are retired. His mother was a nurse. His father ran a small engine repair shop. Callum grew up on the farm. His grandfather started it. His parents kept it through some very hard years, and Callum took it over when he was 26. He expanded it. Slowly, carefully. The way he does most things. By the time I met him, Lichen Creek was selling at 4 markets across the Ottawa Valley and had started a small CSA box subscription. Community-supported agriculture, where local families pay up front for a weekly box of whatever's growing. 40 families the first year, more the second. I told my mother this. She nodded the way you nod at something you've already decided not to care about. "A farmer," she said. Not unkindly. Just the way you'd say, a hobby. The thing about my family is they're not cruel people. I want to be clear about that. They love me, in the way that people love you when they've already decided who you should be and keep waiting for you to become her. My father worked 80-hour weeks for 20 years to give us opportunities. My mother read to us every night until we were too old for it. They are genuinely good people who developed, somewhere along the way, a very narrow idea of what a good life looked like. And I didn't fit it. I'd never fit it. I became a teacher instead of a doctor. I dated a farmer instead of a professional. I lived in a rented half-duplex in Westboro instead of buying in Rockcliffe Park. Every Christmas, every Thanksgiving, every Sunday dinner. It accumulated. Small comments, gentle redirections, a kind of low-level hum of not quite, not quite, not quite. I got used to it the way you get used to a draft in an old house. You stop noticing the cold until someone opens a window and you realize how frozen you'd been. My sister got engaged last October. His name is Brendan. He's a vascular surgeon. They met during her residency. And he's from a family that my parents have, in the year since the relationship became serious, spoken about with a reverence usually reserved for hospital boards and federal grant committees. His father, Gordon, is a civil engineer who built a successful infrastructure consulting firm called Ashford Group over 30 years. Projects across Canada, some international. My parents mentioned Ashford Group the way other people mention the weather. Constantly, casually, as if everyone simply knew. The engagement party was my sister's idea. She wanted something formal, she said. A proper celebration. The venue was a private dining room at the Fairmont Chateau Laurier, the old stone hotel by the Radeau Canal that looks like it should have nights in it. The guest list had 63 people on it. Both families, family friends, colleagues. My sister had small name cards printed on ivory cardstock. I was seated at table 4. My parents were at table 1. Brendan's parents were at table 1. My sister and Brendan were at table 1. Callum and I were at table 4, with 2 of my sister's medical school friends who I'd met once before, and their partners, and a couple from Brendan's side I'd never seen in my life. I noticed the seating. I noticed it, the way you notice when someone's taken your parking spot. That first flash of feeling you immediately tell yourself is too small to matter. Callum noticed too. He didn't say anything. He's good at that, at letting things pass without making them heavier. We arrived together. Callum in the one good blazer he owns, which is navy, and fits him perfectly, even though he bought it for a cousin's wedding 4 years ago. I was in a green dress I'd had since before I knew him. He held the door. He always holds the door. My father spotted us from across the room and came over with the practiced ease of a man who spent decades making patients feel comfortable right before delivering bad news. "Callum," he said, shaking his hand, "good of you to come out. The way you'd say it to a tradesperson who'd done a decent job." Callum smiled. "Wouldn't miss it. Congratulations on the engagement. She looks so happy." My father glanced at my sister across the room, then back at us. Yes, she does." And then he drifted back toward table 1. We found our seats. Callum got me a sparkling water without being asked. The dinner was beautiful. 3 courses, a cheese plate, little printed menus at each place setting. I kept my shoulders relaxed. I laughed at the right moments. I made conversation with the people at our table. I was fine until the toast. My father stood about 40 minutes into dinner, tapping his glass with a small spoon. The room quieted immediately. He's a man who commands rooms without trying. He talked about my sister with the kind of pride that fills a space. He talked about her dedication, her talent, the years of training. He talked about how she'd always known exactly what she wanted and gone after it. He talked about Brendan with warmth and genuine affection, and then, I don't know if he planned it. I've turned it over many times and I still don't know. He turned slightly toward our table. Not fully, just enough. "And to our whole family," he said, smiling. "All here to celebrate. Even the ones who—" He paused. A small, amused paused. Took the scenic route. Quiet laughter. A few people who didn't understand looking around, sensing something without knowing what. I understood. I looked at my water glass. I looked at it for a long time. I felt Callum's hand find mine under the table. Just briefly. Not to comfort me, I think. Just to say I heard it too. The toast ended. Applause. Dinner continued. Brendan's father, Gordon, caught my eye from table 1 and gave me a small, uncomfortable smile. The kind that says I noticed, and I'm sorry, and I don't know what to do with that. I gave him a small smile back. I'd met Gordon twice before. He was a quiet man, thoughtful, the kind of person who asks follow-up questions when you tell him what you do. 20 minutes later, Callum excused himself to the washroom. And Gordon stood up and walked to our table. I thought he was going to say something to the couple on my left, who were on his side of the family. But he stopped behind Callum's empty chair, looked at the name card, and then looked at me. "Your partner," he said slowly. "Callum. Callum who farms in Almonte?" "Yes," I said. Gordon sat down in Callum's chair. He leaned forward. "Lichen Creek Farm?" "Yes." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "We've been trying to get a meeting with him for 8 months. I didn't understand what he meant." "I'm sorry?" "Groundwork," Gordon said. "Your partner founded Groundwork?" I need to stop here and explain something I didn't fully know until that night, which is that Callum had, about 2 years before we met, co-founded a small company with a friend of his from agricultural college. The company was called Groundwork Systems. It did soil analysis and sustainable land management consulting for farms and municipalities across Ontario and Quebec, helping landowners and local governments understand what they had, what it could support, how to use it without destroying it over a 20-year horizon. It had started with 3 employees working out of the farm office. By the time I met Callum, it had grown. By the time of my sister's engagement party, Groundwork had 17 employees, offices in Ottawa and Guelph, and had recently signed a consulting agreement with the region of Peel on a major land use project. Callum had never hidden this. He'd told me about Groundwork when we'd been together about 3 months. But he was quiet about it. He talked about the farm the way he talked about the farm, and he talked about Groundwork as a side project that had grown bigger than he'd expected. He wasn't secretive. He just didn't lead with it. He'd never once brought it up at a family dinner. I had mentioned once to my mother that Callum had a consulting company. She'd said, "Oh, that's nice, a little side business," and moved on. I hadn't corrected her. I don't know why, exactly. Partly because I'd learned what happened when I brought up anything that complicated the story she'd already decided was true. Partly, I think, because some part of me wanted to wait, wanted to see if it mattered to them that he was a good person, a kind person, before they found out any other reason to think he was worth knowing. It did not. Callum came back from the washroom to find his chair occupied by my sister's future father-in-law. Gordon stood immediately, extended his hand. "Callum, Gordon Ashford, Brendan's father." Callum shook it. "Of course, I've met Brendan a couple of times. Congratulations on the engagement." "Thank you," Gordon said. "I have to ask, are you the Callum Whitmore behind Groundwork Systems?" There was a pause, not an uncomfortable one. Callum doesn't do uncomfortable pauses. Just a brief recalibration. "I am," he said. "Co-founded it with my business partner." "Small world." "Small world," Gordon repeated. "We've been trying to arrange a meeting for months, the Halton Region project. We're the infrastructure lead and the land assessment component has been a gap we can't fill properly. Your team's methodology is exactly what we've been looking for." They talked for 12 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on the wall without meaning to. They talked about the Halton project, about a municipal land use framework Gordon's firm had been developing, about soil degradation timelines and construction impact assessments. Gordon pulled out his phone and showed Callum something. A diagram, a report, I couldn't see. Callum nodded, asked 2 questions I couldn't hear, nodded again. My father had stopped talking at table 1. I know this because I could see him from where I sat. He was watching. My mother was watching. My sister had turned slightly in her chair. When Gordon finally went back to his table, he paused at table 1 on the way. He said something to my father. My father's expression didn't change exactly, but something in it shifted. The way a face shifts when information rearranges it from the inside. Later, I found out what Gordon said. He said, "Mitchell, you've got an impressive son-in-law on your hands. I've been trying to get Callum in a room for nearly a year." He did not know that my father had, 40 minutes earlier, called Callum the Scenic route. The rest of the evening passed. Dessert was served. There was dancing. Callum danced with me badly and cheerfully in the way he does everything, fully, without self-consciousness. My sister found me near the end of the night and hugged me, and I could feel her wanting to say something and not finding the words, and I let her off the hook because she'd had a beautiful night and she deserved that. My father found us by the coat check. He shook Callum's hand again. This time it was different. The grip, the eye contact, the slight lean forward. The body language of a man who has reappraised something and is trying not to show the effort of it. "Gordon speaks very highly of your company," he said. "Gordon's a sharp guy," Callum said. "His firm does excellent work." "I had no idea," my father said. And then, to me, "You never mentioned—" "I mentioned it," I said. Quietly. No heat. Just the fact. My father looked at me. Something moved across his face that I didn't have a name for right then, but that I've spent a lot of time thinking about since. I think it was the particular discomfort of a person who realized he'd been given information and chosen not to receive it. "Well," he said, "we should have you both for dinner soon, properly." Callum smiled. "That'd be great." I smiled too. I didn't say anything else. In the car on the way home. Callum driving, the 417 quiet at that hour, the city shrinking behind us. I sat with my coat in my lap and looked out the window at the dark fields past Canada. "You knew," I said, "that Gordon's firm and groundwork had been in contact." "I knew his firm had reached out to my business partner," Callum said. "I didn't know he was Brendan's father until tonight." "Did you plan that?" He glanced over. "Did I plan to run into the CEO of the infrastructure firm that wants to hire us at your sister's engagement party? No. I mean, did you plan to not say anything? To just let it know?" he said. "I just don't think it's usually the right move to introduce yourself to your girlfriend's family by listing your credentials." I looked at him for a long time. "You should have told them," I said. "Earlier. Months ago. So they could what?" he said. Not unkindly. "Respect you more because of me?" I didn't answer. We drove the rest of the way home without talking. Which, with Callum, is never the same as silence. It's more like thinking out loud without words. My mother called me 3 days later. She asked how I was. We talked around the edges of things for a few minutes, the way we sometimes do. Both of us knowing there's a real conversation underneath, and neither one wanting to be the first to step onto it. Then she said, "Your father felt terrible about the toast." "Which part?" I said. She was quiet. "Mom," I said. "Which part did he feel terrible about?" Another pause. "All of it," she finally said. He knows he doesn't always make you feel." "He doesn't make me feel like I chose well," I said. "He makes me feel like I settled. Like teaching is settling and Callum is settling and my whole life is a polite version of giving up. And I need you to know that it's not. And I need him to know that it has nothing to do with groundwork or Gordon Ashford or any of that." The line was quiet for a long time. "You're right," she said. "You're right, and I should have said something a long time ago, and I didn't, and I'm sorry. It wasn't everything. It wasn't the conversation we probably needed to have. The one where we go all the way back to the report cards on the fridge, and the feeling of sitting at table 4, but it was something. It was a door, cracked. My father called that weekend. He apologized for the toast. He said he'd been working on understanding the difference between the life he imagined for me and the life I'd actually built, and that he was starting to see they weren't the same size, and he wasn't sure when that had happened. He cried a little, my father, who I have seen cry twice in 31 years. I cried too. We're in family therapy now. The three of us, me, my parents. Callum offered to come. I told him not yet. Gordon and Callum had their meeting 6 weeks after the engagement party. Groundwork signed a consulting agreement with Ashford Group in January. My father mentioned it at Christmas dinner. Not the way he used to mention things. Not as a credential. Not as proof. Just mentioned it. Carefully. Like a man trying out a new way of seeing. My sister got married in June. It was a beautiful wedding. Outdoors at a vineyard in Prince Edward County. The lake behind them flat and gray-blue and enormous. I was a bridesmaid. Callum sat in the third row and cried during the vows, quietly, like it embarrassed him, and then laughed when he caught me watching him from the aisle. I thought, standing there in the June light with my sister's hand in mine, this is what a good life looks like. Not smaller than what my parents imagined. Just shaped differently. Shaped by the things I actually chose. Callum was waiting at the bottom of the steps after the ceremony. He had a piece of grass stuck to his suit jacket, already, somehow. He'd been sitting in a chair for 40 minutes. He's like that. He exists in the world in a full contact way. I pulled the grass off his jacket. He caught my hand. Your dad came and found me during cocktail hour, he said. What did he say? Callum looked at me for a second. He said he was sorry for the scenic route comment. Said it kept him up for weeks. And I told him I didn't mind scenic routes. That's usually where you find the best farms. I laughed. Really laughed. The kind that comes from somewhere low and real. My father was across the courtyard talking to someone from Brendan's family. He looked over at the sound. And he smiled. Not the careful smile he used at coat check. Not the smooth, professional smile. Just a smile. Tired around the edges and honest. I'm not going to tell you that everything is fixed, because it isn't. Family wounds take longer than 6 months and 2 apologies. We still have dinners where I feel the old weight of it. The way a joint aches in cold weather. But it's different now. Something shifted, and sometimes that's all you get to start with. One daughter is a des. Callum was never the scenic route. He was always the destination. I just had to stop apologizing for knowing that. I've thought a lot about what actually caused that night to unfold the way it did. Not the coincidence of Gordon being Brendan's father. Not Callum's company, or the Halton project, or any of the external machinery that made the room go quiet. Those were just the visible surface of something that had been building for a long time underneath. My father spent years treating respect like a currency, with a very specific exchange rate. You earned it through titles, institutions. The right kind of business card. He wasn't a bad man for believing that. He built his entire life inside that system and it rewarded him. But what he didn't account for is that the people he quietly dismissed were building things too. Just not the kind you can hang on a wall. Callum never walked into a room announcing what he'd done. He didn't correct my mother when she called groundwork a little side business. He didn't bring it up at Christmas dinner to level the playing field. And for a long time I found that frustrating. I wanted him to just say it, to make them see. But I've come to understand that what he was actually doing was something harder and more honest than that. He was waiting to be known as a person before he was known as a resume. He'd figured out something I was still working on, that if the only thing that changes how someone treats you is discovering your credentials, then what changed wasn't their respect for you. It was their calculation of what you're worth to them. That's a different thing entirely. The moment my father apologized, really apologized, the phone call, the tears, what struck me wasn't relief. It was the recognition that his behavior had had consequences he hadn't intended. He'd spent years making small decisions, the seating chart logic, the toast with the pause in it, The way he'd say, "That's lovely," and turn away. Each one felt minor in isolation, but they accumulated in me, and they accumulated in the kind of relationship we had. And eventually, they accumulated into a moment where his future son-in-law's business partner looked at him across a room, and he had to reckon with what he'd missed. That's not punishment, it's just physics. What you put into a relationship is what the relationship becomes. And when you consistently communicate to someone that their choices are lesser, you don't get to be surprised when they stop bringing their full self to your table. What I keep coming back to is this. The hardest thing I did through all of it wasn't staying quiet at that dinner, or waiting for my father to find his way to an apology. The hardest thing was continuing to believe that my life had value before anyone with influence confirmed it, that teaching 30 kids how to see the world through making something with their hands, that mattered. That a man who knew his soil the way Callum knew his, who built something patient and real out of the landscape of his own province, that was worth loving. Not in spite of what he'd built, but because of who he was while building it. Intelligence isn't only the kind that gets you into medical school. Integrity isn't only visible when someone important is watching. And the resilience I had to grow, quietly, over years of Sunday dinners and table 4 seating arrangements, that's mine now, in a way that no credential could have given me. We're still in therapy, my parents and I. It's slow. It's worth it. Callum still has mud on his boots. I still love him for it,